We're now recording in Zoom. I'm gonna hit record in OBS and we're off and running. Okay, so again, we start with me in front of the drums. Welcome, my name is such and such. Here's what you're about to check out. I'll see you on the other side. I switch screens and here we go. All right, and can you hear me okay right now?
Fine.
Excellent. If any tech issues or anything like that, definitely let me know.
Okay.
All right, so this is what we're going to cover today, life as a wave. And as I mentioned already, it is something that's been 25 years in the making, and it was created to help me solve my own cognitive issues, which I was never able to fix through supplements, seeing doctors, whatever, couldn't do it. And so I came up with this system using principles of music and physics from electrical engineering. I know that sounds a little strange, but let's just dive in and see what we see. So first of all, I want to do the setup, what this is all about. And if I can get my switcher to switch the scene, there we go. So let's set the stage here. First of all, two main facets of one thing to me. Tapping your potential that's in all of us, as well as then expressing it fully, living your passion to the fullest. That's a general big picture idea. Let's set the stage. What we all want. I'm speaking to the universals right now. And besides being safe, secure, fundamental, we also want to be free from the crap that stops us from doing our thing. I also like to think that we want to perform well in the things that we love, our work, our passion, and we want to have some success along the way. And for me, most importantly, I want to enjoy the hell out of the ride. So all of this I represent with one, what I call the universal full of life symbol. We are attracted to people who are full of life, kids, puppies, right? And we are at our best when we feel that sense of being fully alive, whatever that means for you, all right? So that's the singular game at play, period. So that's what we want, but then life happens. We've got the endless to-do list, you got the unexpected stuff, the crises, right? And then you've got how your mind processes it. The worry, the doubts, fears, anxieties that can occur because of how we respond to life happening. Quite often, myself included, we look to outside sources to handle whatever issues are getting in the way of us doing our thing. We're reading the books, checking out the latest, greatest techniques, the gurus, right? But what often happens under the best intentions is we still end up like, what the hell? I'm still as stuck as ever, and I've been trying everything. So there's this very common cycle that goes around. We want something, gets in the way, and we go round and round. And we end up thinking like, hey, maybe there's something wrong with me. That's what I ended up thinking after hundreds and hundreds of times trying, because as I've already shared with you, my cognitive issues affected every single facet of my life. From being around people, I've had social anxiety, extreme shyness. I stuttered and stammered, and I often felt really, really, really out of it, like fog brain, if you will. But my number one source of torture has been what I call my flow stutter. And I have yet to meet another musician who has this. And so I felt really strange because out of 3 music schools that I went to, dedicated my life originally to jazz guitar and eventually went to other instruments, trying to find the flow, which I could not. And I often practiced 10 to 12 hours every day, but in the end, the notes get jumbled up. There's a Tourette syndrome-like hesitation that I could not stop. And the more I tried, the worse it got. So I tried fixing. I took all these supplements, these nootropics, these brain supplements and stuff. Nothing did anything, and I too was left like, what the hell? And what's wrong with me here? What's going on? But on one day, I decided to just wipe the slate clean of everything I had taught, everything I had tried, just wanted to start all over again. And as I wiped the slate clean, one of the things I ended up taking a look at and noticing is something I call the judgment model. It is a model that we're born into without even realizing it. It's the assumption that something is good or bad, right or wrong. And how I judge myself and others are based on, do they show up as a good person to me, right? Or, as I do my day, a lot of times I'm running by the shoulds, have tos, and musts. And there's a place for that. But as far as finding flow and fluency and being full of life, I found this to not be the best model. So instead, what you're about to see here, this model is based on physics. That is it. No belief systems necessary. So part one, this sets the stage for the actual model. Every single principle, and there are thousands of them, is based on one idea: movement. And it is what I came up with when I thought about this particular question I'm going to get into in 1 second. But I just want to talk about this thing called movement for a little bit so that we're on the same page. So of course there's movement when, moving our bodies, right? That's an obvious form of movement. But here what I mean by that is we're also creating movement when we have a problem and we come up with a solution, an invention, a new creation. That is movement from here to there. And same thing with our goals. I'm here right now, I want to get to a certain place. That's movement. In the overall trajectory of my life, we can frame it up as movement. Very simple idea, but watch what we can do with this when we create it as a base layer for every single thing else that we're going to get into. So this idea of movement came up, occurred to me when I wiped that slate clean, I asked myself, what does life itself want as I observe like nature? And the answer I came up with is really, really, really simple. More life. That's it. It wants to move, grow, and expand. And it's looking for opportunities to do that. Very simple idea. And I mentioned looking for tubes to move through. A tube could be a water plumbing where water is going through. It could be a wire where electrons are flowing through it. Or if I'm drumming and my arms are moving, the movement is going through my arms. Those are the tubes. And that'll make more sense as we get into this. But it's a very simple metaphor to keep in mind. So that's it. Life wants to move, and it's looking for things to move through. Simple idea again. Now, 4 elements of movement, and this is not something that I'm necessarily going to put in the slides. I'm not sure, but I just want to really give some teeth to this thing called movement. And I said that as a foundation for all of life, moving, growing, and expanding. I also mentioned that in nature, as far as I can tell, there's no such thing as a problem. It's just whatever is occurring. And then it uses that, what we call a problem, like a star exploding in the sky, a forest fire, all sorts of different things that we see as a problem. I can't, as far as I can tell, the universe and nature, it does not need that kind of framework. It's just going to transform here the grit to the pearl. It creates new life from the crap of life, if you will. Also, movement has rhythm, timing, tempo, and as I already mentioned, it's looking for connections, pathways, tubes to move through. So different elements of movement that will come in handy with this model. Here's a cool thing. All those things can be expressed by what I call the simple wave. And we get this from something, a fancy term called Fourier transform in electrical engineering. It just says that you can build all sorts of wave patterns using this guy right here, that shape. That actually describes movement. If you take a look from positive to negative, from here to there. So now I would consider going on camera and checking in with people. And for now, I'll just say, why is movement important? Let me just get back on camera with you for a quick second. If I can find OBS. And there it is. Okay. So this is going to end up being a little bit longer because of this, but that's all right. So why movement? What's it going to give us? Number one, it's using tools that life and the universe uses itself. Number two, it's going to give us deep insight into rhythms, patterns, timing, cycles, which become very important when it comes to flow. Number three, it's going to give us the simplest model for working with the mind you could ever create. Wait till you see, that's the final part of this training. And number four, the ultimate form of movement, being flow, it's going to give us deep insight into how to entice that experience more often and more consistently. So that's the summary for part 1. Part 2, waves. I am going to go into the 4 important principles of the wave, and then I'm going to dive into each one with a little bit more detail. But I want you to see the whole picture of the wave. And again, the wave is movement, and it also shows the vibratory nature of life, if you will, all atoms, molecules, and all that kind of stuff, right? So there's just 4 principles I want you to keep in mind, and I'm going to go right through them real quickly. First of all, waves are in everything, and everything is built of waves. Here's a real important one. Waves carry information. Those dots represent, like my voice is being delivered on a wave right now. My voice are those dots, or those dots could be music on a radio station. The magical part is when waves wave at the same time, an incredible phenomenon takes over. I'm going to get into that in a little bit, but it is the most profound phenomenon in life. I call it the grand connector. I also call it the wave magnet. We'll get into that in a second. 4th principle is, by the way, when waves wave really quickly, they have more energy and more details, and that becomes essential for this entire game at play that you're about to see. That's it. So again, to go over that with just a little bit more teeth, it's all waves, you know, radio signals, vibrations, molecular, et cetera, and also rhythm can be expressed as a wave in all forms of movement. Carry information. So I already mentioned how my voice are the dots on that wave. And we also, when we're taking a look, for example, through a telescope, and we're looking at the vibratory nature of what we're looking at, that's got information on it. It tells me the distance, what chemicals are in the atmosphere, et cetera. So there's a lot of information on these waves if we tune into them. Now, here's the coolest part. Say we got a radio, and we want a particular station, let's say 94.7 FM. What that means is that music on that wave right there, that carrier wave is vibrating 94,700,000 times per second. So now the radio, it too has a wave, and here's the important thing. There's a wave generator in there, and as I tune the dial up, the wave goes faster and faster. So when the 2 waves, in this case, when my radio vibrates 74,700,000 times or whatever that is, right? Same speed as the carrier, something magical happens. They entrain, and it means to connect one wave or pattern with another. As soon as it's entrained, you can see the 2 waves are now connected, and like a train track almost, you can see the music then has a pathway to go into the radio. We filter it out, send it through the speakers, and there you go. As you're going to see later on, this is not just a metaphor, this is identical to how the mind tunes in to the different channels of life. And that's one of the main things about waves, is that life comes in on particular channels, just like different radio stations. And as I already mentioned, fast waves have more energy and details. And so you can think of slow waves as low def, and then fast waves as high definition TV and whatnot. You got more details in there. So now we're going to take those 4 principles, and I'm going to introduce the game board, which I call wave maps. And so you see the radio here, and now the radio dial is now vertical to on the right-hand side. And remember, slow waves, there they are. Fast waves are up there. And each one has a corresponding channel, and we'll get into that more in a bit. But that's the basics of it all put together. Now, I would cut into the camera, and I would mention some key things to know about the wave, but I've already basically covered it. So I'm just going to move on to part 3. The mind is a conduit. Remember that tube? To allow movement to move through it? I see the mind as the main conduit to either allowing the movement, or if we have doubts, fears, and other parameters that constrain us, the movement is constrained and we get less. So, This is going to be now the simplest model I could ever conceptualize in terms of the mind. Because if you think about it, the mind is capable of creating millions and millions of different thoughts, perceptions, assumptions, judgments. It's endless. And the vast majority of them are underneath the surface. We have no idea what those things actually are. So there's psychology, there's therapy, there's all sorts of great stuff out there. And I do want to say, all great stuff. However, I found some fundamental shortcomings with just about all the approaches out there. And so I'm going to get into that right now. So to set the stage up for setting up a simpler way for dealing with the mind, instead of necessarily going into the content of what we're dealing with, and hey, therapy is good to have awareness of what happened to me as a kid and why I'm this way today. Okay, great. But paradoxically, sometimes if I become so aware of that about me, I define myself accordingly. And I have found people going into therapy trying to fix themselves perpetually, never really moving through under the best of intentions. And so here is a simpler way, and I'm going to set this stage by asking a very simple question. What happens to your energy when you have a positive thought? And universally, people will recognize that their energy goes up. Now, when my thinking goes up, a whole ton of things happen. And this is second by second by second. This is a dynamic thing. When I get into a better a frame of mind, if you will, and let's say I have a lot of positive thoughts and I'm in a good mood or whatever, if you ever notice, your thinking is clearer. The quality of my thoughts are better compared to a muddled mind or a foggy brain, which I was perpetually in for just about ever. So whenever I have a clear thinking day or I get my ideas, that is a good day. I also know that when I'm in that particular state, I'm more creative. I can perform better as well. And life is at its sweetest. I can really enjoy the beauty that life has when I'm in a particular state. So this is all the setup for what I call state of mind. I don't call it other things because state of mind is the most accurate way of describing what we're getting into here. And a couple things to note about the state of mind. It's like a cork. If there's nothing getting in the way, that state of mind will be nice, high and clear, and will operate really well. That's where it wants to be. Because remember, life wants more life. And if I am turned on and fully alive and awake, well, life gets more life too. So that's the setup. That's a really important distinction. Now the culprit. The main inhibitor to the movement that we all want, I call it the slippery mind because indeed it is rather amazing at how powerful it is, even though it's not very smart. And the job for the slippery mind, by the way, it's only got one job. It doesn't care about my happiness, does not care about my growth, does not care about what I know or want, my awareness. Doesn't operate on that level at all. It's only got one question, one imperative only. Can I survive this moment? That's it. Just this moment. Can I survive this moment? And that's where the judgment comes in. That judgment model, all the thoughts, fears, the blocks that we don't even know we have, the worry, all that stuff comes from the slippery mind. Now watch what we do. We're going to take all that stuff and we're going to separate those two things into just two categories in a bit. But just to really bring home this notion of the slippery mind and what it does, the power of it is like, when you're dreaming at night, the dream is real until you change your state. Now you're awake, and only then do you know that that was a dream. I say that it is the same identical, not a metaphor, it's an identical thing that happens in my every waking moment, that whatever my mind gives me, let's say I'm walking down the street and I see somebody, and for whatever reason, it reminded me of somebody in the past, and all of a sudden my slippery mind identified that, bad person. I never met the person, but my slippery mind will live as if that is real, just like the waking dream, until I change my state. And that's going to be one of the key things to getting outside the influence of the slippery mind. It's getting really good at waking up. Notice what you notice in waking up. It's the hardest thing in the world to do because just like a fish in water, it That's all there is. It's all we can see, just for the moment. So we can know this stuff, I can be really aware, but still for the rest of my life, my slippery mind will trigger stuff and put me inside or under hypnosis of that, and I will forget what I know until I see it and wake up and get back to a higher, clearer state. So that's the slippery mind, and that's the #1 challenge on planet Earth as far as I can tell. The perceptions of other people, of myself, those judgments, they're taken as fact. That's what gets us into more trouble than anything else. So let's get back to the slippery mind and all that stuff and allow us to simplify the game. Not easy, but we're going to simplify to its root thing. Based on movement. Yes or no? Open or close? Remember that conduit, that tube, the mind? If I have a bunch of no thoughts, meaning, and I don't mean the word no, put quotes around those. It's a yes opening kind of response, or it's a no closing kind of response. And the cool thing is you can notice it second by second by second. So as you're doing your day and all of a sudden you have what I call a no thought. And a no thought is anything of judgment, doubt, fear, uncertainty, overwhelm. Oh my gosh, I got so much to do today. That's a no thought, for example. So the cool thing about this is that the instant a no thought gets triggered, I can detect my energy will indeed go down among about a dozen other feedback systems that once we know what to look for, it's amazing the information that our bodies and surroundings and our sensations are giving us. And by simplifying it just to openings and closings, because that's all, by the way, this comes from digital electronics, zeros and ones, you can express the fullness of life by just simple opens and closings. I know it sounds a little weird, but when we use this simple model, now we've got a reliable way to check in with ourselves and ultimately get out of the slippery mind so we can get into that state that we want to be in. So to give you an idea of what happens, your tube, when you wake up in the morning, when you first have your first thoughts, oh my gosh, I got so much to do today. That's a no thought, just squeeze my tube a little bit. Then let's say I remember I just had, I had an argument with a friend last night, a bunch of drama. So I just onboarded in one split second what I call a story, which is simply a collection of no's and a few yeses. So that story, as it onboarded onto my memory, got re-triggered. These are like software programs. Once it gets triggered, a no thought gets triggered, it will continue affecting you for the rest of the day until you either go to bed or you find a way to neutralize it. And that's the game of life as a wave. So you can very quickly, within seconds, like your day starts to feel a little weighted. Something you have to kind of like trudge through or make it through, or you can't wait until it's done so you can just like relax, that feeling. However, I've got over what I call 30 different wave tools to entice the mind to go from a no to a yes, from resistance and judgment to, okay, it is what it is, this sucks, but this is hardcore reality with a capital R, let's respond accordingly. That's being in the yes of something. This is not liking something or accepting something. It's just, this is reality, dude, right now. And so let's say I try a wave tool and I just, one of them is called Mind is Moving. I watch my mind like a movie and I simply acknowledge it. Yep, I hear you. What else you got? Yeah, what else you got? Oh, you got so much to do today. Oh, and I hope the pups do okay, blah, blah, blah. All these concerns of the day. Yep, I hear you. I can watch. All of a sudden, my mind tunes to a different channel and all of a sudden I get a positive thought. Or I get a creative idea for the project I'm working on. And all of a sudden, I have a little bit more energy, I'm thinking a little bit more clearly, and I'm ready to have some fun in my day. So that gives you a sense of real-time yes versus no. So here's the game at play. We're back to the wave maps. This is where it all comes together. So we got the radio dial on the right. Low waves down there, fast waves up here. Now the mind is a conduit, you can see on the left-hand side. The physics says that if I am in a down state, because I have a lot of no's, judgments, worries, fears, anxiety, whatever going through me, remember the mind is like a cork, wants to float, but those no's are pushing it down to that lower zone. And wherever my mind is at, I will tune into the corresponding channel. This one I call the muck channel. There are many channels and many flavors, and this is actually just a 2D representation of this. but it'll give you a great idea of the overall game of play. So the muck channel is, the ruminating, you're upset about somebody, or you just get stuck on some worries and crises in your life, right? And it's very easy to tune into that kind of thing. But up here, if you notice, my tube is bigger, and I'm tuning into what I call the clear channel, where everything resides on that station that I want. More energy, creativity, clear thinking, able to perform better, taking the beauty of the moment. Yeah, we're going to say it's the clear channel. You can also call it the high definition channel. You can call it the heaven channel, the God channel. I don't care. It's just one idea. And again, there are many, many different things in between. So now what we've got is a setup for a very simple but not easy game. Number one, identify what no thoughts are going through me. And again, I can use my wave tools to help me get in touch with that. And I don't even have to know the specific no thought. I can just get the sensation. I don't necessarily have to know what they are, but just the physics of it is it's the slippery mind's no stuff that pushes it down. And then step two is how to entice the mind to go from the lower station to the higher station. That's the simple game at play for everything and anything. So I also put the controller part of my mind that I shared with you that tries to do the doing with music and everything else. It's in that domain. And then the flower part of my mind is in the upper domain. So, yep, simple, not easy. Definitely not. It's a forever humbling thing. But at least it's a reliable thing based on physics that you can feel, measure, and touch in the moment in a variety of ways. So to go from closed to open and to go from a low state to high state, tune into a better channel, it ain't necessarily just a straightforward, easy thing to do. That's why I created 30 different wave tools to help things out. And so now in summary, what we have, it's a guidance system to know if I'm being a conduit for what I want, second by second by second by second. That's a real value. I actually have a thing on the computer. It's a Coach on Demand app I'm working on, and it's a flow meter, and it will show you your flow second by second based on these principles. Second, what we also have is a universal approach. That's what I designed it to be for. Yeah, tapping into my potential, being the best at what I love to do. And also, learning how to transform my challenges so that I'm doing what nature does. It doesn't fight, wage war, block, try to get rid of problems. That's what we humans tend to think that we need to do. No, it transforms it. It uses it. Huge difference right there. And finally, what we have is a solid foundation where, all that good stuff already out there, it is really good stuff, but it's static. There are static ideas that the thinking brain uses instead of taking that concept of life is movement and putting it into the moment. So you're actually experiencing, and that you're experiencing the principles that you've been reading about or trying. And so all of this is based on just one idea. Life is movement. So instead of trying to push and force my way through life, I want to get into the groove and be the conduit. Instead of getting rid of my problems, destroying them, I want to transform them. And instead of necessarily needing to come from the judgment model, I got to be a good person and all that kind of crap, I prefer using the physics. And there you go. So I would normally share a little bit about what I can do as because of it, and then maybe start talking about some of my clients or whatever, but that's it.
Okay, 1 second.
Okay, and I guess I'll keep the recording going so I can get whatever feedback.
Okay.
I'll put myself back onto camera so I can see you.
All right, now I've got a bunch of thoughts for you, actually. First of all, what I'm going to rely on what you said to me yesterday in responding to you. You said to me yesterday, I want to hear honestly, whatever you think, say what you think to me.
Please. And should I put my seatbelt on first?
No, I don't think you need to. I'm not about to react negatively. So the reason I say that is because I'm going to be as honest as I can with you, because that I've spent 30 years teaching too. So when somebody bears their soul, whether that's through asking for advice or presenting, presenting in my case, they're playing to you for the purpose of their growth, you are doing them a vast disservice if you don't tell them what you really say. So I'm going to take you at you strike me as being absolutely on the level with that. You want to hear this because
Yes.
you want feedback that may or may not help you. But you certainly have to be open to whatever somebody thinks in order to make that judgment. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do you that honest, friendly, and in friendship. First of all, my reaction to this is actually, I consider this to be very meaningful and almost exactly on spot. So I really like it. Okay.
Excellent.
So you got my attention because I quite honestly, Carl, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know whether I'd be sitting there going, okay, that's more or less right, but that's not my reaction. My reaction is that's very astute, and most of what you said I thought was really spot on. I think it has great meaning and great and frames up the problem extremely well.
Nice.
You've really identified the problem accurately. I like the idea of the constriction of the tube that constricts. The idea that people impose that on themselves through the negativity of thought loops that are judgmental. I agree with that. I think that's exactly right. I think it is a problem for most everybody, quite frankly.
Correct.
So
yeah.
I'm on board with all of that. This is going to be writing things down as you're talking. So I've got to go back now and pick them up and the threads of them up. Some of them are going to be a little disjointed because it was notes as you were speaking.
Well, I'll tell you what. Sure. Yeah. First, based on your initial feedback, really encouraging the fact that I hit the problem on the head. That's great. And overall, you're on board. So now,
yes,
okay.
absolutely. You've got my attention. I'm listening to you because it appealed to me as true. Okay. So and I thought it was basically well said too. I'll begin with a question, which is I was expecting you to talk to me in a script, and you were talking more or less sketching the ideas.
That's right. I'm just off the cuff. I'm off the cuff. Yep.
But you were speaking me off the cuff. I'm assuming that you're going to speak with a script eventually, or are you going to talk
I am considering that. I'm not sure yet.
My suggestion to you is that you have the skeleton of a script.
I do.
In front of you. But you're good extemporaneously. You know your material. So I don't think you should constrain yourself to just a prefab script, but I would skeletalize the script.
Great. I've already got that in the speaker notes of the slides. I can have that showing up on my 65-inch monitor. And that'll hopefully keep me focused. But as far as the actual phrasing and whatnot, a lot of it is down pat, and then there are fuzzy areas throughout that I'm still little, and I'm going to be getting feedback from Kern and Muddy, who drew the drawings. He loves Life His Way. He's been with us forever. Amazing guy. So I'm going to get feedback from both of them to help par this thing down, because there was a lot to cover. Sure. Very simple ideas. But again, I'm hoping that for the right person, they're going to spend they probably took. I'll have to track it, but it probably took closer to 30 minutes. And but again, for the right person, they're going to be willing to listen. But hey, these are basic ideas, but there's a lot.
Okay, so given that, a lot of what I'm going to say now is along the lines of those details. Okay. So okay. I'm going to go back up to the top of what I wrote. One aside before I start. I think that you are. This is going to be on a personal note of your demeanor. Okay. Now I've now worked with you, and I to some degree we don't go way back, Carl, but I know you somewhat now.
Right.
And I know the way you think, and we spent hours together talking. Okay. So I'm going to give you some personal feedback of presentation. In my opinion, you are your best when you're not injecting enthusiasm into the conversation
Ah,
by attempting to uh, um, energize it, if you understand what I mean. When
I
you're
know
speaking,
exactly well. Yep.
when you're speaking the way you just were, you're at your best.
When I'm
Okay.
just speaking,
So
not matter of fact, kind of like right now, you mean?
yes, when you're speaking more matter of
Yeah.
factly and more about, for lack of a better term, a little more scientifically, if you understand what I'm saying,
Got it. Yeah. You know
and
what? And
less.
that's a really good feedback. And that is
I don't
something.
think I don't think you need to do that energizing, because I think the ideas are sound enough and real enough that they compel themselves,
Thank
and
you.
you don't need to sell them.
I don't need to
Okay,
push it.
no, I would not try to sell them,
That's
because
great feedback.
it comes across as selling. Okay, and I don't
Right.
think you need to do it.
Thank
You
you.
know, you speak well and you've thought this through well, and that's compelling enough. Okay.
That's excellent feedback. I'll tell you what, because it comes from the slippery mind's doubt that I'm clear, because it's an old story of mine. And plus, sharing these ideas for years, I used to not be this, however clear I am now. And typically, yeah. So
I
therefore,
understand.
and so if I'm congruent with the ideas and the validity of the ideas themselves, then I
Yeah.
don't need to necessarily.
No,
I do get
exactly.
wound up. Like right now, I get fired up talking about this. I mean, I'm going to let some passion go through
Sure,
me, of
sure, sure,
course,
sure, sure.
but
Yeah,
tone it, attenuate or tone it
yeah,
down a little bit,
yeah.
maybe.
Well, just the
Yeah.
way you were, the way you settled into this nice mode of, you were describing it, you were describing it
Uh-huh.
point by point. That really works.
Okay, great.
So I think
Nice.
that works better than trying to energize
Fantastic
it yourself.
feedback, dude. I
That's
cannot tell you how valuable that is. Thank you.
good,
Excellent.
good, good. Okay. So now I'm going to hit you with some specific points.
Okay.
You said, one of the first things you said, what you mentioned, fixing cognitive issues, and you referred to that a number of times about yourself, which when you were setting the stage for, when you're framing up the problem, the basic problem.
Yeah.
I ran up against cognitive issues. Okay. You actually did go back at a later point and refer to what some of those were. I would start by framing up what some of those were, so that the listener doesn't spend 5 minutes or 7 minutes or 8 minutes of this listening to wondering what the hell cognitive issues you're talking
Oh,
about.
you know
What
what?
do you
That's,
get?
and actually that's in the script. If I had actually read the script in the pre-wave
Okay.
video on the drums, I say this comes from my own frustrations with cognitive issues like dyslexia,
Okay.
memory, and foggy brain is what I mostly suffered from, always feeling out of it. And what we're going to get into in the training is the number one cognitive issue, which I call my flow stutter, which is where this all came from. But I'll get into that later, and that's when I share my story about the music thing. So yes, the
Yeah.
dyslexia, memory issues, and fog brain. I think a lot of people can relate to at least two of those.
Yeah, sure, and maybe a little bit of a brief personal description about how what those are like to start to deal with. You know,
Yeah, like, oh my
or-
God, to just be in front of people, dude. Scaredest, shyest, most insecure. You could not talk to me. My family, we
Right.
could talk to you until you're 8 or 9 years old because you would hide in a corner.
Okay. Right.
That's how volatile I came into this world. So things like social anxiety, oh my Lord, that's 99% just 100% it basically gone. I don't have it anymore. My thinking was my number one complaint. My dad, the doctor, would drive me to school every day, and I'd say, Dad, I can't think straight. I feel like I'm in a fog. And hey, I mean, see doctors, but nothing helped. Nothing helped. That was really, really the worst thing for me at that time, because the feeling of being out of it. And then I got to be around people too. My biggest struggle was talking with people in a group. Since I was not trained and in sync, because my slippery mind was slowing things down, because that's what it does, the controller. I was always 1 or 2 steps behind the conversation, so the ball would be thrown to me, so to speak, and I'd be like, or somebody would say something witty. I could never think of it. Maybe 2 hours later, it's like, oh, I should have said. So that gives you an idea of some of my daily experiences. Yeah.
Not only do I understand what you're saying, I actually relate to it. So I mean, it makes sense to me.
Good stuff to then put into that 2 minute. I'm going to limit it, the pre-wave video to 2 minutes framing.
I think somewhere in that whole description of what you just framed up is the word fear, and it needs to be there, in my opinion.
Done.
Because I think fear is an essential part of that.
Oh, hell yeah. It's the
and
yes.
I think people relate to that, and people and you're going to find that that more people than not relate to that, you know. And the fear is part of foggy brain, if you ask me, you know. So
Oh,
I mean,
hell yeah.
yeah. So I mean, I don't think there's anything you shouldn't be fearful about saying this is about fear and its limiting factor on flow, because that is a fact.
Oh, yes, it is. I'm taking some notes here. Pre-wave. Make sure I mention cog issues, a taste of what it's like, and then mention fear. That is a good word that I
Absolutely.
haven't used. Okay,
Absolutely.
excellent.
You didn't use that word fear, and the whole time you were talking about it, that was what
Yeah,
was ringing in my head.
that's
Was
so
this is
funny.
about yeah.
Yeah, because that's the
Okay.
main thing.
It is the main thing.
It's funny. Why didn't I want to use that word? But anyway,
I
I
don't
will
know.
now.
I assumed you were afraid to.
Ha!
You mentioned here's another little small point. You
Yep.
mentioned the judgment model. You referred to the judgment model, and every time you talked about self judgment, you referred to good person and proper conduct, and so as an example of how one self judges. I would also add to that whether you're good at something. Am I being good at it?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Not just am I a good person, but because that's only part of the story. A lot of what makes us afraid is, am I really good? Am I really worth something? Am I valuable? Am I doing this well? Am I good? You know,
Yes.
and that's certainly part of that fear model.
Thank you.
Model.
That's a perfect
Okay.
feedback, because in the end, this model is, especially for people who love getting good at it.
Right. And that question right there was what I spent the first half of your presentation wondering whether that was the point. Let me explain what I mean. I was trying to figure out, is this basically about developing applied skill set? In other words, flow for developmental of skill set, or is skill set just incidental to flow in general in life? Is he talking about people's general experience of life and how they live life to the fullest? Or is it more about how they apply that to development of themselves and their creativity is expressed through a certain discipline or skill set acquisition?
So the simple answer is yes to both.
Both.
But for this audience,
yeah.
I am going to be emphasizing the being in flow with your skill set thing.
Okay, if that's the case, I think if you want to aim it at that, it came across more broadly as how one betters oneself in general. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yep, I'll find a way to amplify that.
Yeah.
And you know, and in one area, you know, the slides when I show the books in the guru and the different approaches stuff, I could have something, I could mention something, or I could have a picture that shows instruction books for how to get good at your drums, or something like. It could be books not just on personal growth, which that's all that was, but now put in sources of when I want to learn how to do something and get good.
Yeah, it wouldn't take too much to talk about how that specifically affects the growth as applied to personal development in a discipline. It wouldn't take too much to do that, I don't think. You mentioned also, you kept saying stuff gets in the way. You said it a couple times, and I wrote, what stuff? ?
Doubts, fears,
right,
judgments,
right, and that's in a continuation of the whole idea of what is the factor of fear in as an impediment.
Yeah, and you know, another thing that stops us without realizing it are the assumptions I make, which create parameters. The brain has to categorize things. It can do nothing else. It has to be able to categorize things so it knows this and that. Right. In so doing, when I make a judgment, I'll give you a really good example. Let's say I want to open up a new restaurant unlike anything else I've ever seen in my life. What I can do is I can write out a list of assumptions that will go into a restaurant. You're going to have food there, right? Yes. You're going to have a cook there. Yes. You're going to have tables and chairs. Yes. You're going to, right? If you then just take any one of those assumptions and go in the opposite direction, by definition, now you've got a novel potential idea. Here, I'm going to say, we're going to have food cooked at the restaurant. No, we're not going to do that. Let's see what we do with that. And all of a sudden we get the idea, oh, well, we could have people bring in their food, potluck. Oh, and then we could have like different rooms where people are free to meet one another and try their food. So we got a whole novel idea just because we gave up one assumption. And again, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of assumptions and limits and parameters that we put on things, especially with what we think is possible in our lives based on, am I good enough?
Right.
And part of the core message of Untapped Genius, which I do mention in one of my things, I have to add it, is, in the pre-wave, I mentioned not only has this helped me, and I might put it somewhere else, find flow and fluency, but it also ended up giving me key insights into what I call Untapped Genius, which is the name of my company. And it does not refer to the Einsteins. It does not refer to, some people have good genes and all that stuff.
No.
No, specifically what I mean, built-in abilities of the mind and the body and life itself that we all have, and that when you can recognize them, last tail piece is that when I can recognize those abilities, like the ability to entrain, that can help redefine what I believe is possible in
yes, you're talking about helping people get out of their own way.
Yes,
and allow themselves to be the fullness of what they can be, rather than stopping themselves, limiting themselves.
Yes.
and that is great stuff. That is applicable to so that's an essential problem. And by essential I mean an essence like problem for the world.
There you go.
About it.
And would you agree for performers?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Very good.
Now, let me give you another one. Okay.
Yep.
I like the parallel between the wave and creativity. I think that there's a word you should use in there. There's three words that popped into my head that weren't in the presentation that I thought could be. One was fear. The other was sine wave. As you were talking about, you were trying to make the point. I thought it was a very good point between measurable facts of physics and its parallel to the way one experiences life. Yes. What happens in flow with the human mind.
It's really the main distinction.
Yeah, and the sine wave, you drew a sine wave. And
and I call it the simple wave.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna tell you how you should say it, but that was a sine wave, and I like and that makes it extremely elemental. In its comparison, its analogy becomes very physics like that.
Perfect. So what I can simply do is, so this sine wave here, which you'll recognize, then I call it the simple wave because, and I mentioned the Fourier transform. I do want to insert little things from my electrical engineering. Again, to give further teeth, Fourier now.
I like that. I thought that was effective. Excellent. I thought you were talking about waves. There's in physics. There's sound waves. They're measured in sine waves. There's light waves, which this is a truth of physics, of particle physics. And you're trying to draw that parallel, and it's a meaningful parallel.
Excellent.
The other thing you talked about entrainment. That's a good analogy too. You use the description of tuning into a frequency on your radio and having the entrainment between what was being broadcast and what your radio is doing so that it resonates. And that word popped in my mind as synchronicity.
Yes.
Which was another word I thought I would use if I was saying that.
Now, synchronicity, synchron, with time. Typically that's different than synchrony, which is having things be in sync. Synchronicity are those meaningful coincidences that aren't necessarily coincident. I've done, since I got into entrainment, I dove deep into this stuff. And when it comes to synchronicity, you think of somebody and they just happen to call you, that kind of stuff. I've been able to identify 7 different kinds of synchronicities. This goes into the metaphysical world. and it gets a
Yeah, that's
little
not really what I was talking.
fluffy.
That's not what
So
I was
right,
talking about.
you're talking about synchrony. Yeah, getting
Yes,
things in
synchrony,
sync.
synchrony. Yes, you're right. You're right. My mistake.
Yeah,
But that
and
is,
so
but that is,
entrainment is the key thing with that. And you know, when people, let's say now, again, after this video, that's when I get back on camera for the one last time. So, what'd you think? Here's some ways that we can begin using in your life. And so, I am opening the doors to Untapped Genius. The actual invitation is where I say, bring your passion, projects, your interests, come join us to further explore life as a wave and what it can do for you, kind of thing. Click here to join. Boom.
okay. So that's where you're going to reveal the wave tools, which you mentioned any number of times, but
right, the wave
describe.
tools will be revealed within the club. There's
Right.
going to be lots of training. There's so much fun to be had. Once we're all on board with just this one training, you got all the terms, you got all the stuff. Now we can dive deep. And I've got these really cool videos where you show entrainment with these metronomes and stuff, wave patterns through something called cymatics, the study of waves, really cool science experiments. So yeah, man, we're going to be having all sorts of fun.
So I thought that that's where you're going, but the point is you're not going to tell the wave tools and this teaser. You're trying to get people to
right.
seek you further to find out what those are, right?
Yes, unless a version of this I'm going to be doing is a live webinar. And then I might, you know, for an hour, that I might give an example. I actually did give one example of a wave tool, the Mind is Movie one. It's the most fundamental, basic one, where you become the observer to your mind. So I did mention one of the wave tools. But yeah, so in this video, I don't...
In terms of feedback, you mentioned wave tools a number of times, and I wasn't quite sure whether you were going to start talking about them or what they were.
I see.
And it seems to me that some verbiage about those as being revealed when you join me, you know, or this is where we're going with this. We're going to talk about wave tools. We're going to talk about the tools you use to find these, to open that tube and allow that untapped genius to flow.
Oh, I wish I could write fast enough. That was really good. We are going to explore these wave tools to open a tube.
Yes, I think you need to say that. Essentially, what you're telling somebody is, I'm going to take you here. You know,
and change your state, yes, and experience more flow, which is the main topic.
And just to reiterate, I really buy that as valid. I buy that as true and meaningful.
What?
The idea that there are tools that one can use and to actually in other words, you can use your own brain to unlock your own brain is what you're trying to say, and that I believe is true.
Yes, and what was the thought I just had about the wave tools? Shit, what did you just say now?
But I wrote down wave tools, exclamation point, question mark, describe. What are they? What are you talking about? So, I mean, something has to be said about the fact that you didn't tell us what those are about. They are to come. Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yes. And the main distinction with these wave tools that I do want to mention is that it takes, and I mentioned this probably a few times, but when I mention the wave tools is, these are dynamic moment-to-moment tools. That's Absolutely. What really sets everything apart.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. I get that. And I think that's right.
Dynamic.
There's one thing that you said that I didn't understand, and that was the analogy of seeing on a person on the street. You lost me there.
Oh, the story thing. Got it.
Yeah, I didn't understand exactly what you meant by that. And I wasn't sure that really was pertinent, because it sounded like something that you experienced that I didn't really relate to. And I didn't actually know what you meant, to be honest with you.
Okay. Let's see.
It was for me, it was an ineffective example.
Okay, so, great. Yeah. And you know what? I might want to come up with a better example related to performance-related stuff.
Maybe. If somebody asked me what he meant by that, I wouldn't have been able to tell him.
So what I mean by story is just a collection. It's a
I mean the street, seeing someone on the street. If someone said, "What was that thing he was saying about the seeing someone on the street?" I would say, "I'm not really sure. You'll have to ask him."
Right. I get you.
And just, you know, this is a presentation where you want you don't want people. I'm quite sure you want the viewer to understand every damn thing you said.
Every single point. Yes.
Yeah, right. Of course.
That's right. Okay, I will work on a better example for story. Okay.
And that's pretty much what I had. Because I thought you got stronger as you went along too. And I thought the section on the mind in what did you call it? The mind and the mind and how its function.
The state of mind, and then
the state of mind. The third section.
Mm-hmm.
The third section.
Yes.
I thought that was the strongest one. I thought the weakest one was setting up the problem in the beginning in your personal experience. I thought it left too many gaps. I thought you could have been clearer about saying this was the problem. This is the problem people have. This is the problem I had. You know, that you're going to find many people relate to that problem. You know.
So are you referring back to what you had mentioned earlier? So in my pre-wave to set things up, just to let them know what it's actually like for me. Yeah.
Right.
Excellent.
I think if you frame that up really clearly, now you've got people leaning in. You know what I'm saying?
Excellent. Yeah.
And they're going to say, "Oh yeah, I had that problem. I've had that problem. That's talking to me." You know, and that will require a little bit more exposure of yourself.
Oh, I have no problem with that. As a matter of fact, I'm holding back. I tend to share too much about myself. So you see me going on the other end of the spectrum. But yes, I get it.
It's a little evasive about what the problem was, and not quite detailed enough.
Excellent.
And but by the time you got to talking about tools and the mind and getting flowing with really getting in the flow of talking about flow, talking about and its analogy with physics and the tube analogy is a very good one.
Nice.
And the floating the cork and so forth, and the idea about how to expand that and let it rise and be in the moment and not and basically get out of your own way, which is what I think you were saying. That's a kind of glib way of putting it, but I think that's basically what you're saying. How does one stop stopping themselves? How do you stop?
How does one stop stopping themselves? Yeah. Oh, I gotta write that fucker down. That's really good. How does one stop stopping themselves?
I can tell you how I have had the same problem. And I also wrote one other thing that you won't know because you don't shoot a bow, and that's target panic. And that's the archery analogy of that. That's what happens to archers. And it happens. The same thing happens to it's target panic is just what archers call the same thing. Okay.
Target panic.
Target panic, and I smiled at one point because you actually put up a graphic of an arrow and a bullseye, because I had just written down target panic and you put up a target with an arrow in the middle of it. I laughed because it was almost timed like 10 seconds after I wrote that. So it was
when I had that drawing come up, right.
Yeah, no.
Oh, interesting. Now, first of all, I do use archery. I'm not an archerist myself or whatever, but I do. I talk about in two different situations. One is when it comes to entrainment. Entrainment actually operates on a wobble. It actually operates on imperfection. There's no such thing as perfect. There's something called the phase lock loop circuit in radios that will take that little wobble and it keeps this signal. And see, basically, it feeds the same signal into itself and it waves with itself. And there's a little imperfection. That little imperfection acts as glue that keeps it right. So now, when I look at the target, you'll notice that there's a little wavering and stuff.
Yes.
And the eyes will naturally pick little points. Instead of being just absolutely static, the eyes do move a little bit, right?
Okay, so you're really getting to target panic right now. This is you don't know you're saying this, but this is exactly what archers talk about. So what one needs to be able to do when they're shooting, for example, is to ignore that wobble.
Yes.
Because if you try to control
it,
you can't shoot anymore.
That's right.
And that's the temptation for archers is they try to stop that wobble. And when you stop that wobble, you can't shoot as well because your mind is so bent on that it actually stifles all the natural mechanics that allow the shot to be executed well. So one needs to actually tolerate that wobble and trust it and just sort of surrender to the wobble and expect that their eye will find that center naturally.
Surrender to the wobble. Yeah, I love it.
So that's actually I think that some version of that exists in all kinds of disciplines where you're trying to execute at a level of skill set, whether that's shooting a basketball or hitting a baseball or playing a bassoon in an orchestra.
Interesting.
There's a point at which you can't control everything.
Well, now wait a minute. How would that show up in an orchestra?
So I'll tell you how it works for me. Okay. And I mentioned this to you the very first time we ever talked about this. And you brought this idea up, and I got that you were on the same thing that I experience all the time. And I was saying to you, for me, the surrender comes, first of all, one has to invest a good deal of time at the elemental level with their medium, right? I mean, that goes without saying. You have to practice the bongos. You have to practice the drums. You have to practice the bassoon. You have to work on the micromuscular movements that and commit them to muscle memory. You have to be able to operate the instrument well. The question is, if you can't operate the instrument well, no dove is going to come down from heaven and sit on your shoulder, and all of a sudden you can play just because you're relaxed or something like that. If you can't play, you can't play. But if you can, and the issue is that when you're under pressure, when people are watching you, when the ears are on you and the eyes are on you and the lights are on you and the cameras are rolling, and all of a sudden, why the fuck can't I do this now when I could when I was alone? That's the question, right? And that's what we all deal with. And that's what we call stage fright for a musician or an actor is target panic for an archer. It's the same goddamn thing, really.
Oh, I thought about that.
So for me, I figured out how to get by that as a player, and I still struggle with it as an archer. So, you'd think I would have figured that out by now because I did whip it as a player. But there's a big difference between the two that I experienced, and I'll tell you what it is. When I play, I learned to surrender myself to the real flow of the music, and to make myself an exponent and a vehicle, a vessel for it.
That is it. Let me interject real quickly. I make the distinction, me doing the music versus the music doing me, number one. Number two,
absolutely. I think that's a fine way of putting it.
And it's also identical to a radio, that I don't have to be the source of music. I get to be the vessel for the music to go through me. And when I surround,
exactly what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
And when it's a difference between me doing the music versus being the music. And I'm telling you, that has been point blank the number one challenge of my entire life with music is the controller grabbing on, and it won't let go. But now I'm learning how to. And when it does, the music goes from level 2 to a level 10.
Absolutely. So when I teach my students, I'm always trying to explain that difference to them. The difference between, because as a teacher, you have to spend all kinds of time with the nuts and bolts of how to operate the instrument, right? And the practice side of it.
All my teachers covered that, and only
the mechanical side of it. You have to invest that in students. But if you don't, if that's all you do, that leaves that whole area of how one performs under pressure untouched, right? And the problem is if that person can sit down in the practice room and be brilliant, and then gets in front of everybody else and goes, ribbit, what the hell? You've got a big problem. It's like that cartoon I love, One Froggy Evening, my favorite cartoon.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's I use that with my students. Like you've got to, somehow you have to be able to sing "Hello, My Baby" when everyone's watching.
Right. I've thought of that. I've actually used that as an example before. That's hilarious.
My favorite
cartoon. And I'll never forget the time then I was in a rock band, and we were playing a concert for the very first time, and I remember just this massive tension in my arm, and it was like why is it so hot? What the hell? I never could figure. Now I know it's the controller taking over, because there's a perceived threat. The slippery mind says, let's hold on tight here.
When I do that on stage, I will play. My knowledge of what I'm doing and my skill set is such that I will probably not play C rate now, but I'll play B rate, and B rate's not good enough. You know, for me, in plugging into a world-class organization, I have to be able to allow myself to flow in a way that makes me an integral part of something that is happening all around me, which is at that level. And to do that, I have to surrender myself to the music and not try to control it, not try to impose my will, and not try to micromanage every movement. And I've got to let the tension go and be. But for me, that happens by just surrendering myself to the vast inspiration and enjoyment of what's happening all around me, and opening my heart to the music and listening to my colleagues. I listen to what's happening around me, and I become part of this gorgeous thing that's happening. And as I play, I'm not thinking about what I'm doing anymore. I'm thinking about the music that is a river flow around. It's flowing around me, Carl. It's a great word. The word flow is what's happening, and I am becoming part of that, and my cork floats then.
And that is exactly, for the first time in my life, starting to experience both of them every day on my drums. And at a certain point, on certain days, the controller lets go completely. It is so apparently scary for the controller to let go that I'll go through, well, I went through the first 20 years of music where it probably almost never let go.
Yeah.
And as I was practicing the instrument, I was using the controller because it actually, even in the mechanics of my instrument, I can view it as like if I'm practicing a 4-bar thing or something like that, I'm practicing being micro flows, or that one little lick. Once I can be in flow with that one lick and I put all the flow pieces together, I'm practicing flow while I'm practicing the mechanics. There's something about that there's that overlap kind of thing.
I think there is. And I think one really has to be able to do both.
And I couldn't. And no teacher ever told me this.
It's also on a continuum, so that there are certain critical moments where one has to bring a little bit more concentration to bear on a given moment, but then fade back into the flow. Then, be aware of this, and you have to get good at actually going back and forth between the two. But the main thrust has to be that flow, I think.
Excellent.
Okay. Yeah. So when I tell my students, when I get them ready to go take auditions, when I get them ready to go perform, I talk about how all that control work has to be done in the practice room. But when they're on the stage, it's all done. One opens their heart and shares from their soul what it is they've done, and trust it and go with it. And if you don't win, or you don't, that's okay. Especially if what you did on the stage comes very close to what you did alone. In other words, if you're in the practice room and you play at X level, whatever that level is, I tell them, if you even get within 90% of that under pressure, I tell them, I almost never get to 100% of it. But if you're at even very close to it, you've done very well. Then what you need to do then is just keep that level of controlled excellence growing, and let your flow under pressure mirror that and grow with it. You see what I'm saying? So that I tell them the big problem is what we've just framed up, which is that you've reached an X level of excellence alone, but then can't duplicate that under pressure. That's a big problem.
It was the killer for me.
It's a killer for anybody. That if you're able to do the vast majority of that under pressure, even if you didn't think it was 100% of it, it's still very good. And all you need to do is keep it growing, your excellence level, and let that track it.
What gives me more tangible hope than ever, because I gave up the dream of music after 30 years, gave up for 20, got the drums back about 4 months ago. That's all I've been doing. And in the 4 months, I have grown so much as a musician, and because now I'm learning how to put my mind in the right place. Now, it was for all years, just even by myself, the controller was in control 100% of the time. My brain, I concluded that that's how I need to learn how to do things. And it's just not in music, it's in every single thing. Even, this is so embarrassing, used to be. I went to this one music school and I hung out with these cool musician dudes, percussion from Brazil and Puerto Rico, all these playing, right? And they were all cool. And yeah, they would do those handshakes, right? It's not just a normal handshake. They would, right? I would fuck it up every single time. And to the point where one guy said, like, well, you really have a hard time with that, don't you? Oh, that was mortifying. Yeah. Not to mention trying to build rapport with a girl.
Right.
You know, so this controller thing slowed my brain down with everything.
Yeah, sure.
The torture is indescribable. And so in contrast, the joy.
Yeah, Carl, I understand. One thing you said something about people being witty around you. And
yes.
Then an hour later, you have this beautiful witty that comes back at you, but because your brain just clamped. Yep. It's like it's in a vice.
Clamped.
Yeah.
That's another good word.
I very much relate to that, understand it.
Now, here's the interesting thing. When I practiced all those years, it's 100% controller. Then I realized there was that part of the controller, right? Without realizing it, I was then using the controller to try to control the controller.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Now I know. There's one wave tool I call the flow cushion. The flow cushion has given me tangible, by putting, and this is very interesting when it comes to entrainment. So when I'm talking, the brain sends my voice back into itself and it entrains with itself and it creates flow and fluency in speaking. If that feedback, this is my theory now, if that feedback loop is faulty for any reason, you get stuttering. There's a device called Speak Easy that you put in your ear and it duplicates, it duplicates your voice. It's a subtle delay on it, ever so subtle, that wobble, that imperfection.
Yeah.
Feeds it back in, and I've seen people who say, my name is, right? They put this thing in, my name is Ted, and it instantly corrects the feedback loop system. So what I ended up doing is singing, which I've always wanted to do, but I was made fun of in music school because I couldn't sing a note, and my teacher would yell at me in front of everybody, pounding on the piano. Why can't you sing this note, Mr. Cantino? Okay? Yeah. So in my family, we can't sing. We can't sing on key. Bullshit. Because you know what I can do now? I can do something actually rather miraculous. I can sing with any song. I can be on pitch. I won't know the words. I haven't tuned in that channel typically yet. But I can sing on key now. I can harmonize. Oh my God, I always wanted to harmonize with acoustic guitar, James Taylor stuff, or whatever, right?
Yeah, right.
I can harmonize, I can improvise, and I can do this for brief little moments with a song I've never heard before. The physics of what's going on is I'm learning how to be a true conduit or vessel. And as I am being that, I am truly conducting that music, and my body seems to already know the song, even though I've never heard it before. Even worse, or better, I'll hear a variation of a song that I already know. And so my controller, there's a few different faces of the controller. One is the predictor. It will then stop listening to the music. It says, uh-oh, this part's coming up. And then I go into thinking controlling mode, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that's the predictor. Yeah. And so if I am singing with a song that I already know, but it's a variation, like a live version of a James Taylor song or something like that, that'll screw me up all more because my controller is predicting, oh, I know this song. Whereas I can actually perform better for moments. So to me, this is giving insight into this thing called Untapped Genius, where, have you seen America's Got Talent? This one guy, Cody, he was like, you couldn't look at it. He was just like, put in front of the piano, and he played the piece, and he became Frank Sinatra, 100%.
Right.
And people are like, wow, what's that? You know, and most scientists look at the solid world, genes and all that kind of stuff. I say, well, I think we're looking in the wrong domain. I think by using the radio and all this kind of stuff, it does give insight into the savant, and I know it because I am that at times now. I get to that high level, and it's only little brief moments, but it gives me. Yeah.
But the brief moment shows you the possibility.
That's it.
It proves it's there. You know. You know, it's like Marco Polo discovering. That's there. That land is there.
Brief moment.
You know,
brief moments.
That's absolutely. I mean, you wouldn't be able to do that if it wasn't there.
That's
the
right.
The amount of time you did it for is irrelevant.
And so, one of the big picture messages of Life is a Wave is referring to the untapped genius that, no matter how confident or whatever that you may be about your skills and whatnot, my deep conviction is that you are more amazing than you can even realize.
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. There's no question. No question that's true.
Yeah, and by pointing to those forces that life uses itself, entrainment. Some other time I'll show you the video of the metronomes. There's no brain, there's no body, there's no genetics, there's no luck, there's no nothing.
Right.
It's pure physics. The metronomes all beating at the different times. You put it on a floating floor. That's the vessel. That's the conduit, the tube. They're all blah, 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 blah. You wait, and they all get in sync.
Yeah. Right.
Amazing. And so that ability to get in sync is built in not only in our bodies and minds, but in life itself. And that, to me, is the thing that can help us redefine who we think we are and what we're capable of.
I think you're right to whether or not you wanted to aim this at mainly a person looking to comprehensively look at their whole life that way, or specifically with a skill set, those things are unavoidably linked and need to be talked about. They go together. And
those two topics.
Yeah, I mean, the broader aspect, the broader truth of this in your life is unavoidable when talking about the specific of skill set building. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I agree with you. I think you're right about that.
Jesus, I'm now on to 5 pages here. Wow. Okay, so you said both broad picture.
The broad picture and the specific, they're inextricably linked.
I like how you said building skill set.
Yes, building
like
skill
that.
set.
No matter what, you can be a musician, artist, athlete, doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
Skill set.
In fact, it's all the same. I've come to learn in my life that building a skill set, no matter what it is the same process.
Yes.
And it's this process of acquiring ability, but learning to get out of its own way, your own way too.
Yes.
The things that you're talking about are cross applicable to all skill sets. Acquisition of all skill sets.
Excellent.
And when I learned how when I learned to acquire that skill set in music, finally it dawned on me that I could apply it to other things, all kinds of things. Oh my goodness. Basically the world's your oyster at that point.
Yes. See, that's the juice of Life is a Wave. That is why I say at the end, this is meant as a universal approach that you can use for everything and anything.
Right.
Why? Because it's built on one idea, movement, and the physics of.
Well, I think I support it. I think it's great work. I think it's great.
Thank you, John. Your feedback is literally the most valuable, insightful feedback I've ever gotten on this work.
Oh, I'm glad to. I'm glad to hear that.
God!
But I love what you're doing. I believe in it.
Thank you. And
I think it's incredibly meaningful. I would hope. Would you please be willing to let me hear the script when it's done? I'd love to hear it.
Oh, absolutely. When I fine tune all the talking throughout the entire thing.
When you kind of get a little bit, when it's a tighter presentation, because I think this is great stuff. I'll be glad to point people towards it too.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic, John. Thank you so much. And one parting question along those lines. So the original idea is to have the Untapped Genius is going to be so much fun. We are going to be doing so much stuff. We're going to be using virtual reality. We're going to have show and tell nights showing our greatest artwork and this and that. I'm going to be showing my Coach on Demand mobile app, wave tools, all this kind of stuff, science experiments, drumming, jamming, right? Lots of fun stuff. But to keep it simple, because I'm now years behind launching this thing. I could have done this a long time ago.
You know
that's
what,
okay.
Carl?
That's okay.
It is okay. It is.
It is. Because it's better than ever.
You know what you're doing. The longer time you've been going with this, the better you are at it.
It's true. It really is true. So the idea is a simple mini launch, and this is going to happen within probably a couple of weeks if I can get this thing recorded. I'm going to send out the invitations, and next day they watch the video, and that day they can join if they want. And the initial price for the first 100 members will be $100 a month. So for group coaching, typically it's $200-300, something like that. And they're going to get up to 10 hours of coaching and training every month. So that comes down to about $10 an hour versus life coaching typically is anywhere from $100 to $300 an hour or more for peak performance trainers. Like there are some people in my market potentially that if I were to charge less than $6,000 a month for training, coaching and training, they wouldn't even look at me. But I want to make this accessible to people, but yet I want to attract people who are already committed to the thing that they do, and they get this. So after they watch the movie, they see the potential value, like you see it right now.
Well, I think you will get I think those are the people you will get. I mean, very few people. A person that would want to do this is not going to be somebody that doesn't have the experience of being frustrated and trying to do just this. You know what I'm saying?
That's right. So what title, what description, I call them peak performers. What other language can I use so that when I use that, they're going to say, oh, that's me? Without describing a particular
now, but this gets into the question that I was raising first, which is, what's your target audience? Are you trying to
initially peak performers and flowers? Yeah, what we're talking about. That's the first one I'm testing, and it's really the main market because my juice is like, man, I want to be in flow doing all sorts of cool shit. Period. Right. And people who are committed to doing that and love that, those are my people. That's my target audience.
Okay, if that's your target audience, I like that. I like that term. Peak performer, and you're talking about peak performers that are blocked, peak performers that are struggling with being the I hate to use the term the best they can be is
right,
but
best they can be, yeah,
stuck, blocked.
It's not be. What is that word? I'm not at my best. I'm kind of like almost there, but what is that word? But anyway, so that's the target audience.
I know. I'll come up with the word.
And as far as the price point now, founding members, again, for the first 100, it's gonna be $100 a month. Again, coming down to $10 a month. Plus, they're gonna have lifetime access, all trainings, and all the other fun stuff that's going to be onboarded down the road. So for the serious person, I think it's affordable.
Yeah.
But then again, I don't know based on somebody's budget or whatever, but based on their commitment to the work that they do, and if they see the value that this can help them, then the value, $100 a month, is actually ridiculously cheap.
Right. I think that's right.
Okay.
All right. I think that's right. Yeah. I don't think that's not if you're asking me whether that price point sounds shocking, no, I don't think so at all.
Okay.
No, I mean if somebody if that opens up their eyes and doors for them, $100 a month, no, that's not too much to ask. Absolutely not.
Yeah. And the students that you're working with, the ones that you want to work with, are ones who are so committed that they're willing to move to your town.
Yeah. And they're gonna pay me. They're gonna pay me more than that an hour.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah. Right. No. I don't think so. I don't think so. You may find out over time that even goes up. I mean, you need to get to a place where you've worked it for a while and it's working, and people are. You get to that place where, there's a competency that comes from working real time over time with people.
And I do with people, yes. And like the filmmaker, he's like my best friend as well. We met when I drove across country to California in my van to go to percussion school. I was drumming on Venice Beach, and it was right in front of his apartment. I thought he was going to kick me out. He comes out to me and says, "Hey, I heard you jam. You want to come up and jam?" So yeah, okay. I find out that he's this multi-Emmy winning, Oscar winning, he's got like tons and tons of freaking things all over the place. He's a documentary filmmaker. Fantastic work. Making this world a better place kind of thing. But anyway, he, what were we just talking about? I just totally lost my train of thought why I brought him up.
What
were you just saying? Oh, people who are committed to
Yeah, we were talking about price point for people that are
And then you were saying that you'll get compensated when you work with me.
Yeah.
Well, I've been a coach for 22 years, and I have turned people on to Life is a Wave individually for quite some time.
Sure.
As a matter of fact, Kern, he loves it so much, he's helping me with this movie. He wants to share it with people and stuff, and he's also invested $50,000 in coaching on this stuff so far.
Wow.
Yeah.
Coaching what? Coaching
peak performance, and it's actually, in his case, it's we're getting into that peak flow and all that kind of stuff, but it's mostly state of mind to deal with the pressure of the film industry and anxiety and that kind of stuff. That's what we initially worked on, but now it's expanding off to great stuff.
Such a huge issue. I mean, there's people that go for hypnosis for this kind of stuff, and people that treat with drugs or treat with try all kinds of ways of unlocking their potential. Underperforming, peak performers.
Underperforming. That's the word.
Peak performers that are underperforming their potential. Are you underperforming your potential? If you're a peak performer that is underperforming and feels blocked and knows you're not performing to your potential, underperforming their potential. I'm sorry, I phased out on you because that's what popped into my head.
That's it.
Yeah,
I just wrote that down. Perfect, John. Yes. Sometimes I have no words to describe how I'm feeling or thinking or whatever. I have no words to let you know how much I,
Carl, I
very much deeply appreciate the time that you just gave me.
Thank you for trusting me. I really appreciate you showing me.
I'm almost tearing up right now. Jesus Christ, what the hell's going on with me here?
I love my everything, I love what you're doing, man. I love it. I support it. I think it's great. I wasn't sure how it was going to hit me, and I'm very impressed with it. I think you're right on the right track.
Excellent, man. Yeah. Excellent. All right, man. Yeah. So actually, Kern and Muddy are coming right up. I got to take my pups out.
Okay.
Thank you again. And when I have the first test recording with everything in it, I'll throw it your way and see what you think.
I'd love to see it. I'd love to hear it.
All right.
Yeah.
Done. All right. Okay. And as far as your site, please let me know as soon as you get the images or whatever, blog post. Sure. Let's go get that thing happening.
Okay, we will. I'm sure we will. Yeah.
All right, man.
Okay. All right, my friend. You have my admiration and my friendship.
Right back at you, man. Thank you.
All right, brother. Yep.
See ya.